Good evening, friends. Tonight, we'll drift into a slow and gentle journey through Norse myths and the ancient stories of Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that spans between worlds. We'll walk beside Heimdall, the watchful guardian, and explore the quiet moments that shaped the connection between gods and mortals. Dim your lights. Settle under your blanket. Let the noise of the day fade away. And if this calm journey helps you relax, feel free to tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is in your city right now. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world as we explore these ancient stories together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our journey across the Rainbow Bridge. You stand at the edge of Midgard on a morning when the mist still clings to the grass. Above you, something catches your eye, a shimmer of colors that seems too bright, too perfect to be just another rainbow. This is Bifrost, the bridge that connects your world to the realm of the gods, and you're about to discover why mortals can only admire it from afar. The bridge stretches impossibly high, its colors more vivid than any rainbow you've ever seen after a summer storm. Red burns like the forge fires of the dwarves, orange glows warm as autumn leaves, yellow shines bright as Thor's lightning, green flows deep as the forests of Jotunheim, blue stretches vast as the northern sky, indigo pulses mysterious as twilight, and violet whispers soft as distant thunder. But this is no ordinary bridge, and these are no ordinary colors. You notice something else about Bifrost. It hums, not loudly but with a gentle vibration that you feel more than hear, like the way a distant waterfall makes the rocks beneath your feet tingle. The sound reminds you of wind through tall grass, or perhaps the way ice sings when it forms on a still pond. It's the sound of magic itself, woven into every fiber of the bridge that the gods use to travel between worlds. At the foot of Bifrost, where it touches the edge of your world, you see him. Heimdall stands as still as a mountain, yet somehow you know he sees everything. Every blade of grass that bends in the wind, every bird that crosses the sky, every thought that flickers through your mind as you watch him. His armor gleams white as fresh snow, and his sword rests easy at his side, as if it belongs there the way a tree belongs to its roots. Heimdall's eyes are the strangest thing about him. They're not quite blue, not quite grey, but the color of morning sky just before dawn breaks. When he blinks, which he does so rarely you almost wonder if you imagined it, you catch a glimpse of something vast and patient, like looking into a deep well where starlight has collected at the bottom. You watch him watching everything, and you begin to understand what it means to be the guardian of Bifrost. Every day, every night, through seasons that change and years that pass, Heimdall stands here. He sees the gods when they hurry across the bridge on important business. Odin with his ravens, Thor with his hammer, Frigg with her spinning. But he also sees the smaller things. The way morning dew collects on the bridge's lower edge, the way certain birds seem drawn to fly near it, though none dare land. Sometimes you realize, mortals try to touch the bridge, not you, of course. You're content to watch from a respectful distance, but others, braver or more foolish, have attempted to climb toward those shimmering colors. What happens to them? Heimdall's expression never changes, but you notice how his hand doesn't quite rest on his sword hilt when someone approaches with good intentions. It's the others, those who come with greed in their hearts or mischief in their minds, who find that the bridge simply isn't there when they reach for it. The magic of Bifrost isn't just in its colors or its impossible span between worlds. It's in how it knows. Somehow, the bridge itself can sense the difference between a god who belongs on its glowing path and a mortal who doesn't. It's not cruel, this knowing. It's simply the way things are, like how water flows downhill or how fire reaches toward the sky. You settle down on a comfortable stone to watch Heimdall at his eternal task. He doesn't acknowledge you directly, but something in the way he positions himself suggests he knows you're there, that he doesn't mind your quiet presence. You're not here to cause trouble or steal divine secrets. You're simply curious about this guardian and his bridge, this connection between your ordinary world and the extraordinary realm above. As the sun moves across the sky, you notice how Bifrost changes throughout the day. In morning light, it looks solid enough to walk on, its colors bright and welcoming. By noon, when the sun blazes overhead, the bridge becomes almost transparent, more suggestion than substance. In the afternoon, when clouds gather, it pulses gently, as if breathing with the rhythm of distant storms. And as evening approaches, the colors deepen and grow rich, preparing for the night's quiet vigil. Heimdall never seems to tire. His breathing remains steady, his posture unchanged. You wonder what he thinks about during these long hours of watching. Does he remember the day the gods first crossed Bifrost? Does he think about the prophecies that speak of the bridge's eventual destruction? Or does he simply exist in each moment, aware and present, the way ancient trees exist without counting their rings? Night falls, and still you watch. The bridge doesn't disappear in darkness. Instead, it begins to glow with its own soft light, like captured northern lights woven into a path. Heimdall's white armor catches this glow, making him look like a statue carved from starlight. His eyes remain alert, scanning not just the bridge and the approaches to it, but the sky itself, as if he's reading messages written in the movement of clouds and stars. You begin to understand that guarding Bifrost isn't just about preventing unauthorized crossings. Heimdall is watching for signs, for changes, for the subtle shifts that might signal important events in any of the 9 worlds. He's not just a guardian, he's a sentinel, an early warning system, a living connection between the gods and everything they protect. As the night deepens, you realize something profound about this scene. The bridge, the guardian, even your own presence here, it's all part of something larger. Bifrost doesn't just connect Asgard to Midgard. It represents the idea that different worlds can be linked, that gods and mortals exist in the same universe, even if they live by different rules. When dawn begins to touch the eastern horizon, painting the sky in colors almost as vivid as Bifrost itself, you prepare to leave. Heimdall still stands at his post, patient as ever, ready for another day of watching and guarding. The bridge still spans impossibly between worlds, its magic intact, its purpose unchanged. But as you walk away, you carry with you a new understanding. You've seen what dedication looks like, what it means to have a purpose that extends beyond yourself. And you've glimpsed, however briefly, the careful balance that keeps different worlds in harmony, a balance maintained by one guardian, one bridge, and the ancient wisdom that some boundaries exist not to exclude, but to protect. What other secrets might Bifrost hold? And how did the gods first discover they could walk safely across its shimmering path? That question about the gods' first crossing lingers as you settle in for another story, another glimpse into the quiet moments that shaped the Norse cosmos. Tonight, you'll discover that even the gods had to learn how to use their magnificent bridge, and that first steps, whether taken by mortals or immortals, are always the most uncertain ones. Picture Asgard in its earliest days, when the walls were newly built, and the great halls still echoed with the sounds of construction. The gods had their beautiful realm, high above the other worlds, but they were essentially isolated on their cosmic mountaintop. They could see the other realms spread out below them. Midgard with its growing population of humans, Alfheim where the light elves tended their gardens, Jotunheim where the giants built their stone fortresses. But reaching these places required long, dangerous journeys through paths that wound between the roots of Yggdrasil. Then one morning, after a particularly fierce storm had swept across all 9 worlds, something new appeared in the sky. The gods gathered at the edge of Asgard to stare in wonder at a bridge of pure color that arced from their realm toward Midgard. It shimmered and pulsed with its own inner light, beautiful beyond description, but none of them knew what it was or whether it was safe. Odin, ever curious and willing to take calculated risks, approached the bridge first, but even the Allfather hesitated at its threshold. The surface looked solid enough, but it was unlike any material he'd ever seen. It seemed to be made of light itself, crystallized into something that might, or might not, support his weight. He extended one booted foot toward the glowing surface, testing it the way you might test ice on a pond, before trusting it with your full weight. To his surprise, the bridge held, more than held. It welcomed him. The moment his foot touched Bifrost's surface, Odin felt a gentle warmth spread through his body, and suddenly he knew, with the certainty that comes from divine wisdom, that this bridge was meant for the gods to use. It wasn't just a random phenomenon, or a pretty decoration in the sky. It was a gift, a tool, a connection that would change everything. But knowing the bridge was meant for them didn't make that first crossing any less nerve-wracking. Odin took slow, careful steps, aware that far below him lay Midgard, and that falling would be unpleasant, even for a god. The bridge felt solid beneath his feet, but it also felt alive in a way that stone or wood never did. It responded to his presence, its colors shifting and flowing around him like aurora borealis made walkable. Behind him, the other gods watched nervously. Thor gripped his hammer tighter, ready to fly to his father's aid if the bridge should suddenly collapse. Frigg held her breath, her hands clasped in front of her. Balder stood ready to leap forward, his natural courage warring with his equally natural caution. Even Loki, usually eager for risky adventures, seemed content to let someone else test this particular unknown. Odin reached the center of the bridge, that point where the arc was highest and the drop most terrifying. Here he paused, not from fear, but from wonder. From this vantage point, he could see all the world spread out around him with perfect clarity. He could see individual humans going about their daily tasks in Midgard, could watch the light elves tending their crystal gardens in Alfheim, could even glimpse the giants in their distant realm, unaware that the gods now had a swift path between worlds. The view was so magnificent, so all-encompassing, that Odin almost forgot to continue walking, but Bifrost itself seemed to encourage forward motion, not impatiently, but with the gentle persistence of a stream that naturally flows toward the sea. So he continued on, step by careful step, until he reached the other end where the bridge touched Midgard. The humans below had noticed the strange bridge appearing in their sky. Of course, they gathered in groups, pointing and whispering, clearly unsure whether this was a good omen or a sign of coming trouble. When they saw a figure walking across it, a tall man in traveling clothes with ravens on his shoulders, they drew back respectfully. They didn't recognize Odin in his wanderer's guise, but they knew power when they saw it. Odin spent only a few minutes on Midgard during that first crossing. He spoke quietly with a wise woman who approached him without fear, asked her about the concerns and hopes of her people, and promised that this bridge would bring blessings, not curses, to the world. Then he turned and walked back across Bifrost, each step more confident than the last. When he reached Asgard again, the other gods crowded around him, full of questions. What did it feel like? Was it safe? Could they all use it? Would it support Thor's considerable weight, or Frigg's spinning wheel if she wanted to take it with her? Odin answered their questions patiently, describing the warmth and welcome he'd felt from the bridge, the perfect stability of its surface, the incredible view from its center span. One by one, the other gods made their own first crossings. Thor stomped across with his usual confidence, his heavy boots ringing against the bridge's surface like bells. Frigg glided across gracefully, her long skirts flowing behind her like additional colors woven into the bridge's light. Balder practically danced across, his joy in the bridge's beauty making the whole structure glow more brightly. Even Loki, when he finally worked up the courage to try it, found the crossing surprisingly pleasant, though he couldn't resist testing whether he could hang from the bridge's edge or walk along its underside, just to see what would happen. Each god discovered that Bifrost responded differently to their presence. For Thor, it felt strong and solid as mountain stone. For Frigg, it was smooth and comfortable as the finest silk. For Balder, it practically sang with joy. For Loki, it felt patient and slightly amused, as if it knew exactly what kind of mischief he was thinking about and was prepared to handle whatever he might try. It didn't take long for the gods to realize they needed someone to watch over this marvelous bridge. It was too valuable, too important, to leave unguarded. What if enemies tried to use it to attack Asgard? What if someone with ill intentions attempted to damage it? What if mortals, in their curiosity, tried to climb up and walk across it, not understanding that it was meant for divine feet only? The choice of guardian was obvious. Heimdall had always been the most watchful of the gods, the one who noticed small details that others missed, who could see farther and hear more clearly than anyone else in Asgard. If anyone could properly protect and monitor the bridge, it would be him. Heimdall accepted the responsibility with his characteristic quiet dignity. He didn't ask for grand ceremonies or special honors. He simply took his position at the foot of the bridge and began the long watch that would define the rest of his existence. From that day forward, nothing would cross Bifrost without his knowledge and permission. The gods quickly established routines around their new bridge. Morning crossings were for important business. Odin's journeys to gather wisdom, Thor's expeditions to battle giants, Frigg's visits to check on the fates of mortals. Evening crossings were more leisurely, social calls, explorations, the simple pleasure of walking between worlds as easily as strolling through a garden. And through it all, Bifrost remained patient and strong, adapting to each divine foot that touched its surface, glowing brighter when the gods were happy, dimming to a gentle luminescence during quiet times. The bridge had found its purpose. The gods had found their highway between worlds, and Heimdall had found his calling as the eternal guardian, who made it all possible. How beautiful those early days must have been, when everything was new and full of possibility, and the very colors of the sky seemed to celebrate the connection between different worlds. If you're enjoying these gentle journeys through Norse mythology, consider subscribing to join us for more peaceful explorations. Your support helps us continue sharing these calming stories from the ancient world. Speaking of those magnificent colors, you might wonder how something as simple as light could form a bridge strong enough for gods to walk across. Tonight's story takes you deeper into the mystery of how Bifrost came to be, and why its particular combination of colors holds such power in the Norse cosmos. Long before the bridge existed, before the gods had their highway between worlds, the colors that would eventually form Bifrost already existed in the cosmos, but they weren't organized, weren't purposeful. They drifted through the space between worlds like scattered gems, beautiful but useless, each color isolated from the others, unable to fulfill their greater destiny. You can imagine these colors as living things, each with its own personality and desires. Red was passionate and strong, born from the fires that forge metal and the blood that gives life to all living things. It pulsed with energy, always eager to move, to act, to make things happen. But red alone, no matter how powerful, could not span the vast distances between worlds. Orange was gentler than red, but no less determined. It carried the warmth of hearth fires and harvest moons, the comfort that makes houses into homes and strangers into friends. Orange knew how to bring things together, how to create harmony between different elements. It was a natural mediator among the colors, but it lacked red's strength to anchor anything permanent. Yellow blazed with the brightness of Thor's lightning and the warmth of summer sunshine. It was the color of enlightenment, of sudden understanding, of joy that bubbles up unexpectedly on ordinary days. Yellow could illuminate anything, could make even the darkest corners bright with possibility, but brightness alone, without something to guide it, tends to scatter in all directions. Green flowed deep and steady, carrying the patience of forests and the persistence of growing things. It knew about cycles, how things die and are reborn, how endings become beginnings, how the smallest seed contains the potential for the mightiest tree. Green was wise about time and change, but wisdom without action remains only potential. Blue stretched vast and calm, containing the peace of deep water and open sky. It was the color of perspective, of stepping back far enough to see the whole picture instead of just the individual pieces. Blue understood space and distance, could hold concepts as large as eternity without being overwhelmed, but understanding without connection to earthly concerns can become cold and remote. Indigo pulsed with mystery, the color of twilight and deep thinking, of questions that don't have easy answers. It bridged the gap between the visible and invisible worlds, comfortable with magic and comfortable with uncertainty. Indigo knew that some truths could only be glimpsed sideways, never looked at directly, but mystery, however profound, needs some way to manifest in the physical world. Violet whispered with the gentleness of distant thunder and evening flowers, carrying dreams and visions, and the soft voices of prophecy. It was the color of transformation, of change so subtle, you don't notice it happening until it's already complete. Violet could transform anything it touched, but transformation without direction often leads to chaos rather than improvement. For ages, these 7 colors drifted through the cosmos independently, each beautiful and powerful in its own way, but unable to accomplish the great work they were meant for. Sometimes they would brush against each other in the space between worlds, creating brief flashes of rainbow light that mortals would glimpse in their sky and wonder about. But these encounters were random, temporary, pretty to look at, but not substantial enough to serve any lasting purpose. The change came during one of the great storms that periodically sweep through all 9 worlds. Not a weather storm, but something far more fundamental, a reshuffling of cosmic forces, a rebalancing of the energies that keep reality stable. During this storm, the 7 colors found themselves drawn together by forces beyond their control, pulled into the same space between Asgard and Midgard. At first, they resisted this forced proximity. Red was too intense for Violet's gentle nature. Blue's vastness overwhelmed Orange's cozy warmth. Yellow's brightness made Indigo's mysteries seem dim and unimportant. Green's patience annoyed Red's desire for immediate action. The colors clashed and competed, each trying to maintain its individual identity while being pressed closer and closer together by the cosmic storm. But gradually, something remarkable happened. Instead of cancelling each other out, the colors began to discover how they complemented each other. Red's strength could support Violet's transformations. Orange's harmony could help Yellow's brightness become focused rather than scattered. Green's wisdom could give Blue's perspective a foundation in lived experience. Indigo's mystery could add depth to Orange's warmth. Each color brought something the others needed. As the storm reached its peak, the 7 colors finally achieved perfect alignment, not uniformity. Each remained distinctly itself, but a harmony so complete that they became something entirely new while remaining entirely themselves. In that moment of perfect balance, they crystallized into the bridge that would connect worlds, each color maintaining its own nature while contributing to the greater whole. The process was neither sudden nor violent. Instead, it felt like the most natural thing in the cosmos, like 7 notes of music finally finding the chord they were always meant to form together. The colors wove themselves into a path of solid light, each band distinct but inseparable from the others, creating something stronger and more beautiful than any of them could have achieved alone. When the storm passed, and the cosmic dust settled, Bifrost stretched between Asgard and Midgard in all its glory. The colors had found their purpose at last, not just to be beautiful, but to serve, to connect, to provide a way for the gods to move freely between worlds. They had become something greater than the sum of their individual parts, yet each color retained its unique gifts. Even now, when you look at Bifrost gleaming in the sky, you can see how each color contributes to the bridge's function. Red provides the strength that lets it bear divine weight. Orange creates the harmony that keeps it stable across vast distances. Yellow illuminates the path so travelers don't lose their way. Green ensures the bridge adapts and endures through all seasons and changes. Blue maintains the perspective needed to span between different worlds. Indigo adds the magic that makes the impossible crossing possible. And violet enables the transformations that allow gods to walk safely in mortal realms. The colors learn something profound during their transformation into Bifrost. That individual gifts become most powerful when they're shared in service of something larger than themselves. It's a lesson that echoes through many Norse myths. This idea that cooperation creates strength, that different abilities working together can achieve wonders that no single power could accomplish alone. Sometimes when the light is just right and the air is perfectly clear, you can see this lesson written in the bridge itself. Each color band flows seamlessly into the next, creating transitions so smooth they seem like nature's own brush strokes. There are no harsh boundaries, no competition for space or attention, just 7 distinct yet united colors, working together to create one of the most beautiful and functional wonders in all the 9 worlds. What must Heimdall think about, standing guard beside such a masterpiece of cooperation, waiting for the sound that will one day call all the gods to their final destiny? From the beauty of Bifrost's creation, we turn to something more solemn, the horn that hangs at Heimdall's side, waiting for a moment that all hope will never come. Jalahorn, it's called, and its story is one of preparation, duty, and the weight that comes with knowing exactly what role you'll play in the cosmos's final act. You've seen Heimdall standing at his eternal post, alert and patient, watching over the rainbow bridge with those keen eyes that miss nothing. But perhaps you've noticed the horn that rests at his hip, large and curved and carved from what looks like ivory, though no earthly creature ever grew a tusk of such size and purity. This is Jalahorn, the yelling horn, or resounding horn, and it may be the most important object in all the 9 worlds, not for what it does now, but for what it will do when everything ends. The horn was crafted in the earliest days of Asgard, when the gods were still learning their roles and responsibilities. The dwarves made it, as they made most things of power and beauty, but this commission came directly from Odin himself. The All-Father had seen glimpses of the future, fragments of prophecy that showed him how the world would eventually end, and he knew that when that time came, someone would need to sound the alarm that would call all the gods to their final battle. Creating Jalahorn required materials that existed nowhere in the ordinary world. The dwarves had to venture deep beneath the roots of Yggdrasil, to places where time flowed differently, and the building blocks of reality were still malleable. They gathered essence of thunder for the horn's voice, crystallized starlight for its body, and the breath of the world tree itself, to give it the power to be heard across all 9 worlds simultaneously. The crafting process took 7 seasons, not because the work was difficult, but because something meant to announce the end of everything had to be perfect. Every curve of the horn's spiral, every groove carved into its surface, every symbol etched along its length had to be exactly right. The dwarves worked with the patience of master craftsmen, knowing that this horn would never get a second chance to do its job properly. When Jalahorn was finally complete, it was tested once, just once, in a deep cavern far beneath Midgard, where its voice couldn't reach the surface. Even muffled by tons of stone and earth, that test blast made every god in Asgard look up in alarm, made Thor reach for his hammer, made Odin's ravens cry out in distress. The horn's voice carried such power, such undeniable authority, that it seemed to bypass the ears entirely and speak directly to the soul. After that single test, Jalahorn was brought to Heimdall with specific instructions. Guard it well, keep it ready, and when the time comes, when you see the signs that Ragnarok has begun, blow it with all your strength to call the gods to their destiny. Until that moment, the horn must remain silent, its tremendous voice held in reserve like a thunderstorm waiting behind distant mountains. Heimdall accepted this responsibility, as he had accepted guardianship of Bifrost, without complaint, without questions, with the quiet dignity that marks him among the gods. He understood better than most what it meant to be entrusted with something so crucial. The horn became part of his daily existence, as familiar as his sword, as constant as his breathing. But familiarity doesn't breed carelessness. Not with Heimdall. Every day he inspects Gjallarhorn with careful attention. He checks that its surface remains unmarked by time or weather, ensures that no dust or moisture has settled in its curves, tests the weight and balance to confirm that nothing has changed. He keeps the horn oiled and polished, ready to be lifted and blown at a moment's notice. Sometimes, during the long quiet hours of his watch, Heimdall thinks about what it will feel like to finally use Gjallarhorn for its intended purpose. He imagines lifting it to his lips, feeling the familiar weight of it in his hands, taking the deep breath that will power its world-shaking call. He pictures the horn's voice rolling across all 9 worlds like cosmic thunder, reaching every god, every giant, every dwarf, and elf and human, announcing that the final battle has begun. It's a heavy thing to carry, knowing that you're the one designated to announce the end of everything. Other gods have roles in Ragnarok. They'll fight, they'll fall, they'll rage against the dying of the light. But Heimdall's role comes first, and without it, none of the rest can happen. If he fails to blow the horn, if something prevents him from sounding the alarm, then the gods might face their enemies unprepared and scattered. Yet, there's also honor in this responsibility. Of all the gods, Odin chose Heimdall to be the herald of the final battle, not because he was expendable, but because he was reliable, because his watch had never failed, his vigilance had never wavered, because when the moment of ultimate crisis arrives, Heimdall will be where he's supposed to be, ready to do what needs to be done. The horn itself seems to understand its purpose. On quiet nights when the wind is still, and Bifrost glows softly in the starlight, Gjallarhorn sometimes seems to hum. Not audibly, but in a way that Heimdall can feel through his fingers when he touches it. It's not impatient for its moment to come, but aware, alert, ready, like its guardian. The horn exists in a state of perpetual preparation. Heimdall knows the signs he's watching for, the events that will tell him Ragnarok has begun, the Fimbulwinter that will last 3 years without summer, the wars that will spread across Midgard, the breaking of bonds that have held certain monsters captive, the dimming of the sun and moon. When he sees these signs, or rather when he sees enough of them to be certain, he'll know it's time to lift Gjallarhorn and wake the worlds with its terrible voice. Until then, he waits. The horn waits. Both guardian and instrument exist in a strange space between the present and the future, between what is and what must eventually come. They've become symbols of duty itself, of the willingness to accept responsibility for things larger than personal comfort or desire. Sometimes mortals ask why the gods don't simply prevent Ragnarok, why they don't change the future instead of preparing for it. But Heimdall understands something that's harder for others to accept. Some responsibilities can't be avoided, only met with dignity. Some storms can't be prevented, only weathered with courage. Some endings can't be changed, only faced with honor intact. So he stands at his post beside Bifrost, watching and waiting, one hand always ready to reach for the horn that will announce the twilight of the gods. And in his patience, in his readiness, in his acceptance of a difficult duty, Heimdall embodies something noble about the Norse understanding of fate. Not passive resignation, but active preparation, the determination to meet whatever comes with eyes open and courage steady. But for now, in these peaceful times, what is Heimdall's daily life like as he maintains his vigil beside the Rainbow Bridge? Away from thoughts of ending times, let's spend a peaceful day with Heimdall as he goes about the routines that fill his eternal watch. His life might seem monotonous to those who crave excitement, but there's something deeply satisfying about witnessing the rhythms and rituals that keep the cosmos running smoothly. Heimdall's day begins before dawn, though begins isn't quite the right word for someone who never truly sleeps. Instead, he transitions from night watching to day watching, the way a forest transitions from darkness to light, gradually, naturally, without any sharp boundaries between one state and the next. As the first pale hints of morning touch the eastern horizon, Heimdall shifts his attention from the star patterns that tell him about distant events to the closer, more immediate concerns of the daylight hours. The first thing he does each morning is inspect Bifrost itself. This isn't a hurried check, but a thorough, methodical examination that takes nearly an hour to complete. He walks the length of the bridge that extends into Asgard, looking for any signs of wear or damage, any subtle changes in the way the colors flow and pulse. His trained eyes can detect variations in the bridge's harmony that would be invisible to others. A slight dimming in the yellow band that might indicate cosmic weather approaching, a flutter in the violet section that suggests disturbances in the world of dreams and prophecies. Each color tells him something different about the state of the nine worlds. Red speaks of conflicts and passions, growing brighter when war threatens and dimming when peace prevails. Orange reflects the general contentment of mortal populations, their harvests, their family bonds, their sense of security. Yellow pulses with intellectual discoveries and divine inspirations. Green flows with the health of growing things and the balance of natural cycles. Blue reveals the emotional climate of the gods themselves. Indigo whispers of magical workings and supernatural events. Violet shows the state of prophecy and fate, sometimes growing so dark that even Heimdall worries about what it might mean. After his bridge inspection, Heimdall performs maintenance on his equipment. He cleans his sword, though it rarely needs it, running an oiled cloth along the blade, while mentally reviewing the fighting techniques that keep him ready for battle. He adjusts his armor, checking each strap and buckle, ensuring that every piece fits perfectly and moves silently. He inspects Gjallarhorn with particular care, as we discussed before, making certain it remains ready for its eventual purpose. By the time the sun has fully risen, other gods begin to stir in Asgard, and Heimdall's social duties commence. This involves more than simply watching who crosses the bridge, though he does that with unwavering attention. He serves as an information hub for divine activities, since his exceptional senses make him aware of events across all nine worlds. Odin often stops by for his morning briefing, though the All-Father's visits rarely follow a predictable schedule. Sometimes he arrives in his formal robes, seeking official reports about supernatural disturbances or giant movements. Other times he comes in his wanderer's disguise, wanting to hear about the small details of mortal life that only Heimdall's careful observation can provide. "Tell me about the farmer in eastern Midgard who's been praying for rain," Odin might say, and Heimdall will share what his far-seeing eyes have noticed about the man's fields, his family's concerns, the local weather patterns that suggest whether divine intervention might be helpful. Thor's visits are more straightforward, but no less regular. The thunder god likes to check whether any giants have been spotted moving toward Midgard, whether any monsters have broken free from their bonds, whether any situations might require his particular talents for problem-solving through hammer application. Heimdall always has accurate intelligence to share, delivered in the calm, precise manner that helps Thor decide whether immediate action is needed, or whether a threat can be monitored for now. Frigg stops by less frequently, but when she does, her questions are often the most complex. As the goddess who knows the fate of all beings but cannot speak of it directly, she sometimes seeks confirmation of things she's glimpsed in her own visions. The young woman in the village by the northern fjord, she might say, and Heimdall will understand that she wants to know about someone whose fate is particularly significant. He'll report what he's observed, and Frigg will nod thoughtfully, filing the information away in her vast mental archive of mortal destinies. Between these consultations, Heimdall monitors the constant traffic across Bifrost. The gods use the bridge dozens of times each day, and each crossing requires his attention, not because he doesn't trust them, but because each divine journey affects the balance between worlds in subtle ways that someone should track. When Thor travels to Midgard to battle giants, his presence there influences weather patterns and human courage. When Odin walks among mortals in disguise, the very concepts of wisdom and inspiration shift slightly in the areas he visits. When Frigg tends to matters of fate and family, the bonds between people strengthen or change in ways that ripple outward from her location. Heimdall keeps mental notes of all these effects, building a comprehensive picture of how divine activities influence the cosmic balance. It's detailed work that requires both exceptional memory and deep understanding of how the nine worlds interconnect. Most gods focus on their immediate tasks, but Heimdall maintains awareness of the larger patterns, the slow-moving trends that might indicate problems developing over months or years, rather than days. Lunch for Heimdall consists of bread and mead delivered by one of the serving women from Odin's hall. He eats without taking his eyes off his assigned territories, chewing thoughtfully while scanning the horizons of multiple worlds. The food is always simple but nourishing. The gods understand that their guardian shouldn't be distracted by elaborate meals or complicated flavors. He needs sustenance that supports his vigil without demanding attention. Afternoon brings different responsibilities. This is when Heimdall often receives visitors from other realms. Light elves, seeking permission to travel through Asgard on diplomatic missions. Dwarven crafters delivering commissioned items to various gods. Even the occasional giant who comes on legitimate business rather than hostile intent. Each visitor must be evaluated, their purposes verified, their potential threat level assessed. Heimdall has become expert at reading the subtle signs that distinguish honest travelers from those who might harbor hidden agendas. These interactions require considerable diplomatic skill. Heimdall represents not just Bifrost's security, but Asgard's attitude toward other realms. He must be welcoming to legitimate visitors, while remaining alert to potential threats. He's learned to ask the right questions in the right tone, to make necessary inspections without causing offense, to refuse entry to unsuitable candidates, while maintaining the relationships that keep peace between worlds. Evening brings a different kind of watching. As darkness spreads across the 9 worlds, Heimdall's attention shifts toward the activities that prefer shadows, the movements of monsters that shun daylight, the whispered plots of those who mean harm to gods or mortals, the subtle magical workings that are easier to perform when most people are asleep. His exceptional hearing becomes even more important during these hours, as he listens for sounds that shouldn't exist, voices speaking words that shouldn't be spoken. Night also brings beauty that only he is positioned to fully appreciate. From his post beside Bifrost, Heimdall can see the aurora borealis painting the sky above Midgard. Watch the patterns that stars make as they wheel across the heavens above all 9 worlds. Observe the way moonlight transforms familiar landscapes into something magical and strange. He's witnessed countless sunsets and sunrises, each one unique, each one adding to his vast catalogue of visual memories. This is Heimdall's life, not glamorous by the standards of gods who battle monsters and shape the fates of kingdoms, but essential in ways that become clear only when you consider what might happen if his vigilance ever failed. His contentment comes not from excitement or recognition, but from the satisfaction of duty performed with excellence, of service given freely and completely. In the quiet hours before dawn, when even the most restless gods have settled into sleep, Heimdall sometimes allows himself to wonder what it would be like to live differently, to travel freely between worlds, to pursue personal goals, to exist without the weight of cosmic responsibility. But these thoughts never last long, because he knows that his current life, for all its limitations, serves something greater than personal fulfillment. What must it be like for the giants, looking up from their distant realm at the bridge they can never cross, knowing it represents a connection they're forever denied? These gentle stories of Norse mythology continue to explore the quieter moments in divine lives. If you're finding peace in these tales, subscribing helps ensure you won't miss future journeys through the ancient Norse cosmos. From the contentment of Heimdall's daily routine, we turn our attention to those who can only observe Bifrost from afar. The giants of Jotunheim have their own perspective on the Rainbow Bridge, one colored by longing, resentment, and a complex relationship with the divine realm they can see but never reach. In the rocky, wind-swept landscapes of Jotunheim, where ancient stones hold the memory of the world's creation, and every mountain peak tells stories of primordial conflicts, the giants gather to watch the Rainbow Bridge that arcs impossibly across the sky. From their realm, Bifrost appears as a distant taunt, beautiful and unreachable, a constant reminder of the barriers that separate different kinds of beings in the Norse cosmos. You can see them on clear days, standing on the highest cliffs and tallest towers, their massive forms silhouetted against storm clouds, gazing toward Asgard, with expressions that mix wonder and frustration in equal measure. They're not all hostile, these giants. Many are thoughtful, ancient beings who remember when the boundaries between realms were less rigid, when gods and giants intermarried and shared knowledge freely. But Bifrost represents everything that has changed, everything that now divides the cosmos into separate, unequal territories. Loki, cleverest of the giant kings, often stands upon his highest balcony in the hours just after sunset, when Bifrost glows most brightly against the darkening sky. His court gathers around him, giant lords and ladies, whose names echo with the sound of avalanches and earthquake, whose thoughts move with the patience of geological ages. They discuss the bridge in voices like distant thunder, analyzing its construction, debating its purpose, wondering what it might feel like to walk upon that path of crystallized light. See how it pulses. Loki observes, his keen eyes tracking the subtle shifts in Bifrost's luminescence. The red band grows brighter when Thor prepares for battle. The blue deepens when Odin contemplates some new strategy. Even from here, we can read the moods of our enemies in their precious bridge. The younger giants, those born after the divisions hardened into cosmic law, sometimes speak of trying to reach the bridge through force or cunning. They propose building towers tall enough to touch its lowest arc, or crafting magic that might let them leap across the vast distances between worlds. But the elder giants remember enough history to know that Bifrost's exclusion of giant kind isn't merely physical. It's fundamental, woven into the bridge's very essence by forces beyond any individual will to change. Angrboda, mother of monsters, stands apart from these discussions, her attention focused not on the bridge itself, but on the small figure visible beside it. Her supernatural sight can pick out Heimdall at his post, can see the alertness in his posture, the readiness in his stance. She knows better than most what that vigilance costs, having paid similar prices for her own choices and loyalties. Sometimes she wonders if the Guardian ever feels the weight of his isolation, standing forever between worlds, belonging fully to neither. The giant children, if beings born already larger than human adults can be called children, react to Bifrost with the uncomplicated envy of youth. They see the gods crossing back and forth at will, traveling between worlds as easily as walking from room to room, and they cannot understand why such freedom should be denied to them. Their elders try to explain about cosmic balance, about the necessity of boundaries, about the ancient conflicts that made separation seem preferable to constant warfare, but explanations feel thin when compared to the daily sight of that shining path they can never travel. Some giants have attempted indirect approaches to the bridge over the centuries. They've sent messages to Asgard, through neutral intermediaries, proposing negotiations about limited access rights. They've offered tributes and services, hoping to earn temporary crossing privileges. They've even suggested hostage exchanges, prominent giants living in Asgard, under supervision in return for occasional monitored use of Bifrost. All these overtures have been politely but firmly declined, not from pure malice, but from the gods' understanding that Bifrost serves as more than just transportation. It's a strategic asset, a symbol of divine authority, a tool that loses much of its value if it becomes available to potential enemies. The gods remember too well the times when giants and gods clashed over fundamental questions about how the cosmos should be ordered. Yet there are giants who understand and even appreciate Bifrost's exclusivity. Mimir, wisest of the giants, occasionally shares his perspective with visitors to his well. The bridge serves all worlds by serving the gods. He explains to those who ask about the apparent unfairness. Its very existence maintains balances that benefit everyone, even those who cannot walk upon it. Sometimes the greatest service is performed through limitation, through the wisdom to know when access should be restricted. The giant craftsmen study Bifrost with professional interest, analyzing its construction techniques and marveling at the integration of multiple magical principles. They recognize the sophistication required to create something that exists simultaneously in several worlds while maintaining structural integrity across impossible distances. Some have attempted to create their own versions, smaller bridges that might connect different parts of Jotunheim, or provide easier access to neutral territories, but their efforts, skilled though they are, lack the cosmic authority that gives Bifrost its unique properties. On nights when the aurora borealis dances across northern skies, creating pale echoes of Bifrost's colors, the giants sometimes hold great gatherings where they share stories and songs about the Rainbow Bridge. These aren't bitter complaints or angry threats, but complex artistic works that explore their relationship with something beautiful they cannot possess. The best of these compositions capture both the longing and the acceptance that define the giant perspective on divine privileges. There's a particular melancholy in watching the giants watch Bifrost, a sadness that comes from understanding both sides of an ancient division. They're not evil, these mountain-sized beings with their storm-deep voices and earthquake strength. They're simply different, occupying a role in the cosmic order that places them forever in opposition to divine authority, forever excluded from the easy connections that bind other realms together. The wisest giants have learned to find meaning in their exclusion, to see their separation from Asgard as a kind of independence rather than mere rejection. They've built their own culture, their own sources of beauty and meaning, their own reasons for taking pride in their realm and their identity. They don't need Bifrost to validate their worth or confirm their place in the cosmos. But still, on clear nights when the bridge shines brightest, you can see them gathering on their highest peaks, watching that impossible arc of light, remembering older times when the boundaries were less absolute. They stand like living mountains themselves, patient and enduring, witnesses to wonders they can appreciate, but never experience directly. And perhaps, in their watching, they serve a purpose too. Perhaps Bifrost shines brighter, because it has an audience that truly understands its beauty, because it spans not just between worlds but between different ways of seeing and being. The giant's exclusion makes the bridge more precious to those who can use it, while their appreciation gives it meaning beyond mere utility. What would happen though if that perfect bridge, so strong, so reliable, ever showed signs of weakness under the weight it carries? From the giant's distant longing, we move to a day when the Rainbow Bridge itself faced a test that reminded everyone, gods, giants and watchers alike, that even the most magnificent creations have limits that must be respected. It happened during one of those periods when tensions between Asgard and Jotunheim had escalated beyond the usual diplomatic coldness into something approaching actual hostility. A particularly ambitious giant king had been making threats, gathering allies, building weapons designed specifically for war against the gods. The situation had grown serious enough that Odin called for a full military council, requiring the immediate presence of every god with combat experience or strategic wisdom to contribute. You can imagine the scene in Asgard as the summons went out. This wasn't a casual gathering or a routine meeting, but an emergency assembly with the fate of multiple worlds potentially hanging in the balance. Gods who rarely left their individual halls suddenly needed to converge on Gladsheim, Odin's great council chamber, and the fastest route for most of them lay across Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that had never failed to support divine traffic. Thor was the first to respond, naturally. When calls to battle ring out, the thunder god doesn't pause to consider logistics or timing. He simply acts. He came striding toward Bifrost with Mjolnir at his belt, and his iron gloves on his hands, his red hair bristling with barely contained lightning, his whole being radiating the kind of focused energy that precedes storms. Heimdall nodded him onto the bridge without hesitation. Thor had crossed Bifrost thousands of times, and his weight, while considerable, had never posed any problems for the structure's divine engineering. But Thor wasn't alone this time. Behind him came his two massive goats, Tangrisur and Tangorster, their hooves striking the approach to Bifrost like hammer blows against anvils. These weren't ordinary goats. They were supernatural creatures the size of small buildings, capable of drawing Thor's chariot across the sky at speeds that left thunder trailing in their wake. Normally, Thor traveled to other worlds by air, with his goats galloping through clouds rather than across solid surfaces. But the urgency of this summons had made him choose the direct route across the bridge, rather than the longer aerial approach. Heimdall felt the first tremor as soon as the goat's hooves touched Bifrost's surface. It wasn't much, just a subtle vibration that ran through the bridge's crystalline structure, like a note played on some vast cosmic instrument. But Heimdall had stood guard here long enough to know that Bifrost never trembled without reason. His enhanced senses immediately focused on the stress patterns spreading through the bridge's magical matrix, analyzing the forces at work. The problem wasn't Thor's weight alone, or even the combined weight of god and goats. Bifrost had been designed to support divine masses, and its builders had included generous safety margins in their calculations. The problem was the nature of that weight, specifically the way supernatural goats moved across a surface that existed partially outside normal physical laws. Tangrisnir and Tanjors didn't simply walk across Bifrost. They galloped, their enchanted hooves striking the rainbow surface with force multiplied by their divine nature and Thor's own lightning-charged aura. Each step sent shockwaves through the bridge's structure, not enough to damage it under normal circumstances, but creating a resonance pattern that built with each successive impact. Heimdall realized the danger just as more gods began arriving at the bridge's approach. Vidar came running from his hall, still buckling on his thick boots. Vali approached from the south, his bow already strung and ready. Hertha arrived, guided by one of Odin's ravens, moving carefully but quickly toward what he thought was routine bridge crossing. Behind them, Heimdall could see still more figures converging on Bifrost, every combat-capable god in Asgard, all responding to Odin's urgent summons. The Guardian faced a terrible choice. He could halt the crossing, forcing the gods to find alternate routes to Gladsheim and potentially delaying the military council beyond its usefulness. Or he could allow the crossings to continue and hope that Bifrost's structure could handle the unprecedented load. Either decision carried risks that extended far beyond his personal authority. As Heimdall wrestled with this dilemma, Thor and his goats reached the bridge's center span, the highest point of the arc, where the most stress naturally concentrated. Here, the tremors intensified. The rainbow colors that normally flowed smoothly along the bridge's length began to flicker and pulse in irregular patterns. The red band, which carried the bridge's structural strength, started showing hairline fractures that healed almost as quickly as they appeared. The harmonic hum that Bifrost normally generated shifted into a higher, more strained frequency. Vidar, reaching the bridge just as these stress signs became visible, immediately understood the situation. Unlike some of his fellow gods, Vidar possessed both divine strength and mortal learned patience. He stopped at the bridge's threshold and called ahead to Thor, his voice carrying clearly across the rainbow span. "Brother, your goats are pushing our bridge to its limits. Perhaps a gentler pace?" Thor, focused on reaching Odin's council chamber, initially didn't grasp the full implications. "The bridge has carried us all countless times," he called back, not slowing his determined stride. "Surely it can manage one more crossing, even if we're in a hurry." But Tangrisnir and Tanjost, being supernatural creatures themselves, could sense the distress in Bifrost's structure. They began to step more carefully, their huge hooves touching the rainbow surface with deliberate gentleness rather than their usual powerful strides. The immediate stress on the bridge decreased, but didn't disappear entirely. There was still too much concentrated weight for the structure to carry comfortably. Heimdall made his decision. Stepping forward to the very edge of Bifrost, he raised his hand in the universal gesture for halt, his voice carrying with the authority granted by millennia of faithful service. "My lords, the bridge requires consideration. The emergency council is important, but not more important than maintaining the connection between our worlds." This brought everyone to a complete stop. Even Thor, impatient as he was for battle planning, recognized the seriousness in Heimdall's tone. The Guardian had never, in all his years of service, asked traffic to halt for anything less than absolute necessity. If he said the bridge was at risk, then the bridge was genuinely at risk. What followed was a masterclass in divine cooperation under pressure. Thor quickly moved his goats to the bridge's edge, where they could wait while distributing their weight across a broader area. Vidar and the other approaching gods spaced themselves out along Bifrost's length rather than clustering together. Everyone moved with careful deliberation, each step calculated to minimize stress on the increasingly fragile structure. The crossing that should have taken minutes stretched into nearly an hour, as each god traversed the bridge individually, waiting for the previous traveler to reach Asgard before beginning their own journey across the rainbow span. It was frustrating for beings accustomed to moving with divine swiftness, but it was also a reminder that even gods must sometimes yield to the limitations of their tools and infrastructure. By the time the last god had safely crossed, Bifrost had stabilized again. The stress fractures in the red band had healed completely, the color patterns had returned to their normal smooth flow, and the bridge's harmonic frequency had dropped back to its usual comfortable range. But the experience had left everyone, gods and Guardian alike, with a new appreciation for the bridge's limits and the care required to preserve it. Odin's military council proceeded as planned, developing strategies that successfully countered the Giant King's threats without resorting to actual warfare. But in many ways, the day's most important lesson had been learned on Bifrost itself, that even the most reliable systems require respect for their operating parameters, and that sometimes the greatest strength is shown through restraint rather than force. Heimdall added new protocols to his guardianship. After that day, spacing out heavy crossings and monitoring stress patterns with even greater attention. The gods, for their part, developed alternate travel arrangements for large group movements, ensuring that no future emergency would again push their precious bridge beyond its design limits. It was a reminder that in a cosmos where so much depends on the connections between worlds, those connections must be protected with the same care that gods protect their most sacred treasures. And perhaps it made everyone wonder anew about the extraordinary senses that allow Heimdall to perceive dangers that escape even divine notice. Speaking of those remarkable senses that saved Bifrost from disaster, let's explore the extraordinary gifts that make Heimdall the perfect guardian for the Rainbow Bridge. His ability to see and hear across impossible distances didn't develop overnight, and the story of how he gained these powers reveals much about the sacrifices that divine duties sometimes require. Long before Heimdall became the guardian of Bifrost, before the bridge even existed, he was known among the gods for his exceptional awareness of his surroundings. Even as a relatively young god, he could spot a hawk circling at the very edge of vision, could hear conversations taking place in distant halls, could sense the approach of visitors long before anyone else knew they were coming. But these early abilities, impressive as they were, represented only a fraction of what he would eventually become capable of. The transformation began when Odin, foreseeing the need for a guardian with truly supernatural senses, proposed an exchange that would enhance Heimdall's natural gifts far beyond their current limits. The All-Father had learned, through his constant seeking of wisdom and power, about a ritual that could grant sight and hearing that transcended normal limitations. But like most powerful magic, this ritual required significant sacrifice from the one who would benefit from it. The process took place at one of the sacred wells beneath Yggdrasil's roots, in a grove where the boundaries between different kinds of reality were thin and malleable. Heimdall came to this place knowing that he would leave it fundamentally changed, that the senses he gained would bind him to responsibilities he could barely imagine. He came willingly, understanding that someone needed to fill the role that Odin was preparing for him. The ritual itself was both simpler and more complex than you might expect. There were no dramatic incantations or elaborate ceremonies, just Heimdall, kneeling beside the well's edge, offering up portions of his current existence in exchange for expanded awareness. He sacrificed his ability to sleep deeply, trading restful oblivion for constant alertness. He gave up the comfortable limitation of normal sight and hearing, accepting the burden of perception that would never shut off, never provide respite from the constant influx of information. The change wasn't instantaneous. Over the course of 7 days and nights, Heimdall's senses gradually expanded, reaching farther and deeper with each passing hour. On the first day he could see clearly to the horizon of any world he focused on. By the third day he could hear whispers spoken in the farthest reaches of Jotunheim. By the 5th day he could detect the footsteps of a cat walking on snow from 9 worlds away. By the 7th day his awareness had become so acute that he could hear grass growing and wool forming on sheep's backs. But the most remarkable aspect of Heimdall's enhanced senses wasn't their range or sensitivity. It was their selectivity. With awareness so vast and detailed, he could easily have been overwhelmed by the constant bombardment of information from across the 9 worlds. Instead, he developed the ability to filter and focus his attention, to monitor everything while concentrating on what was most important at any given moment. Imagine trying to manage such a flood of sensory input. At every moment, Heimdall can see what's happening in countless locations across multiple worlds: crops growing in Midgard, dwarves working in their forges, light elves tending their gardens, giants moving through their stone halls. Simultaneously, he hears an endless symphony of sounds, conversations, footsteps, wind through leaves, water flowing over rocks, the heartbeats of every living creature in creation. Yet somehow he's learned to organize this cacophony into useful information. His enhanced mind automatically categorizes and prioritizes what he perceives, flagging unusual events for closer attention, while allowing routine activities to fade into background awareness. It's like being able to read every book in a vast library simultaneously, while still focusing on the specific page that contains the information you need. This selective attention serves him well in his role as Bifrost's guardian. While monitoring the bridge and its approaches, Heimdall simultaneously keeps track of divine activities across Asgard, giant movements in Jotunheim, human conflicts in Midgard, and supernatural events in all the other realms. He can detect the early signs of problems developing anywhere in the 9 worlds, often days or weeks before they become serious enough to require divine intervention. His eyes, enhanced beyond mere sight, can perceive things that exist outside normal visual spectrums. He sees the magical auras that surround supernatural beings, can detect the lingering traces of spells and enchantments, can spot the subtle distortions that indicate hidden passages or concealed threats. When he looks at someone, he doesn't just see their physical appearance, he sees their intentions, their emotional state, their level of magical power, their connections to forces and allegiances that might not be immediately obvious. His ears, similarly enhanced, can distinguish between thousands of sounds occurring simultaneously and identify their sources with perfect accuracy. He hears not just words, but the emotions behind them, the truthfulness or deception they contain, the subtle implications that speakers might not even be consciously aware of. He can track individual conversations across vast distances, following specific voices even when they're mixed with countless other sounds. But perhaps the most valuable aspect of Heimdall's gifts is his ability to perceive patterns and connections that escape normal observation. He sees how events in one world influence developments in another, how apparently unrelated occurrences are actually part of larger trends, how small actions can have far-reaching consequences. This pattern recognition makes him invaluable as an advisor to Odin and the other gods, providing insights that inform their decision-making across a wide range of issues. The burden of such awareness is considerable. Heimdall experiences every tragedy, every injustice, every moment of suffering that occurs within his vast range of perception. He sees children orphaned by war, crops failing in distant fields, innocent people falling victim to forces beyond their control. He hears the cries of the wounded, the prayers of the desperate, the last words of the dying. Yet he must maintain his focus on his primary duties, must resist the urge to intervene in every situation that calls out for help. This selective compassion, caring deeply while acting strategically, requires enormous emotional discipline. Heimdall has learned to feel empathy without being paralyzed by it, to remain aware of suffering without being overwhelmed by the desire to fix everything immediately. It's a balance that few beings, mortal or divine, could maintain over the vast span of years that define his service. Sometimes, during the quiet hours of his watch, Heimdall allows his enhanced senses to wander freely across the 9 worlds, not searching for specific threats or information, but simply observing the vast tapestry of existence that spreads out around him. He watches farmers tending their fields, children playing in village squares, craftsmen working at their trades, animals raising their young, plants growing toward the sun. These moments of pure observation, free from the pressure of active guardianship, provide a kind of meditation that helps him maintain his sanity and perspective. His gifts also allow him to appreciate beauty on a scale that others cannot experience. He sees the intricate patterns that frost makes on windows in distant cottages, hears the complex harmonies created when wind passes through different types of trees, witnesses the subtle color changes that occur in sky and water as weather systems move across the landscape. His enhanced perception reveals layers of beauty and complexity in the most ordinary phenomena. Yet for all their advantages, Heimdall's supernatural senses also isolate him from normal social interactions. It's difficult to maintain casual friendships when you can hear every heartbeat, see every micro-expression, detect every small deception or momentary unkind thought. His enhanced awareness makes him too perceptive for comfortable companionship, too knowing for the easy relationships that other gods enjoy among themselves. This isolation is perhaps the greatest sacrifice he made in accepting his enhanced abilities. In gaining the power to perceive everything, he lost the ability to experience the comfortable ignorance that makes normal relationships possible. He sees too much, knows too much, understands too clearly the complexities and contradictions that others prefer to overlook. But perhaps this isolation also suits his temperament and his role as the guardian standing between worlds. Heimdall occupies a unique position that requires both connection and separation, both awareness and detachment. His gifts make him the perfect sentinel, the ideal watchman, the guardian whose vigilance never fails because his senses never rest. And when storms and rain sweep across the 9 worlds, how does Bifrost respond to these natural forces that test its divine construction? From the complexity of Heimdall's enhanced perception, we turn to one of the most beautiful phenomena in all the 9 worlds, the way Bifrost responds to the cleansing power of rain and storm, emerging from harsh weather more brilliant than ever, as if the bridge draws strength from the very forces that might seem to threaten it. You've seen ordinary rainbows appear in your own sky after summer storms, when sunlight breaks through dissipating clouds and transforms scattered raindrops into brief arcs of color. But Bifrost's relationship with weather operates on a completely different scale, involving forces that span multiple worlds and magical principles that turn meteorological events into cosmic celebrations of light and beauty. When great storms sweep across the 9 worlds, you might expect Bifrost to dim or weaken under the assault of wind and rain. After all, even divine constructions must surely have limits when faced with the raw power of cosmic weather. But if you've ever watched the Rainbow Bridge during one of these tempests, you know that something quite different happens, something that reveals another layer of the magic woven into its crystalline structure. The first drops of rain that touch Bifrost aren't like earthly precipitation. They're larger, heavier, each droplet containing traces of water from multiple worlds, melted snow from Jotunheim's highest peaks, morning dew from Alfheim's crystal gardens, storm spray from Midgard's northern seas. When these composite raindrops strike the bridge's surface, they don't simply run off as water would from any normal structure. Instead, they seem to be absorbed into the rainbow bands themselves, disappearing into the crystallized light, as if being drawn into some vast invisible reservoir. As such a storm approaches Bifrost, Heimdall notices the signs long before anyone else. His enhanced senses detect the subtle changes in air pressure that precede cosmic weather, the particular quality of light that indicates dimensional boundaries are becoming unstable, the almost inaudible frequency changes in Bifrost's constant harmonic hum that suggest the bridge is preparing for something unusual. Picture a storm approaching from the dark reaches of space between worlds, carrying with it the chaotic energies that build up when different realms' weather systems collide. These aren't ordinary storms that bring simple rain and lightning to a single world. These are cosmic tempests that span multiple dimensions, carrying within them the condensed moisture of several worlds' oceans, the electrical charge of a dozen different skies, and winds that have traveled impossible distances through the void between realities. As the storm intensifies, more remarkable things begin to happen. Lightning, not ordinary lightning, but the cosmic variety that carries the accumulated electrical charge of multiple storm systems, begins to arc across the sky near Bifrost. You might expect these tremendous bolts of energy to pose a threat to the bridge, but instead they seem drawn to it, striking the rainbow structure again and again without causing any damage whatsoever. Each lightning strike, instead of harming Bifrost, actually feeds it. The electrical energy flows along the bridge's length like liquid fire, moving from band to band in patterns too complex and beautiful to fully comprehend. The red band glows brighter as it absorbs energy related to strength and passion. The orange band pulses with enhanced warmth as it takes in the lightning's creative force. Yellow blazes with increased brilliance as electrical knowledge flows through its crystalline structure. The wind, meanwhile, doesn't buffet the bridge or threaten its stability. Instead, cosmic winds seem to polish Bifrost's surface, carrying away any accumulated dust or debris from its journey between worlds. These aren't destructive forces, they're cleansing ones, removing impurities and restoring the bridge to its original pristine condition. Each gust of wind reveals new depths of color in the rainbow bands, exposing subtle hues and gradations that had been hidden beneath the gentle dulling that comes with constant use. Heimdall watches this process with the satisfaction of someone who has witnessed it many times before, but never grown tired of its beauty. He understands what others might not immediately grasp, that Bifrost wasn't simply built to withstand cosmic storms, but to benefit from them. The bridge's creators, whether gods or some even more ancient force, designed it to draw strength from the very weather patterns that might seem to threaten it. The most spectacular part of the storm comes when all these elements, rain, lightning and wind, combine in perfect harmony around the bridge. At this moment, Bifrost begins to sing, not metaphorically, but literally, producing musical tones that can be heard across all 9 worlds simultaneously. The sound isn't loud or intrusive, but rather like the most beautiful bells ever created, ringing with notes so pure and clear that they seem to reach directly into the soul of anyone who hears them. This music serves a purpose beyond mere beauty. The tones that Bifrost produces during storms carry information, updates about the condition of the bridge, reports on interworld weather patterns, even subtle communications between the various cosmic forces that maintain order throughout the 9 realms. It's a language that few beings can fully understand, but those who can interpret it gain insights into the fundamental workings of reality itself. As the storm reaches its peak intensity, something even more remarkable occurs. The rain that Bifrost has been absorbing throughout the tempest begins to transform within the bridge's structure, processed through the rainbow band's magical matrix. Ordinary water becomes something far more valuable, a substance that carries healing properties, enhanced fertility for crops, and the power to purify both physical and spiritual contamination. This transformed water emerges from the ends of the bridge as a gentle, continuous mist that spreads slowly across both Asgard and Midgard. Wherever this mist touches, beneficial changes occur. Sick plants recover their health, polluted streams run cleaner, even people who breathe the mist find their minor ailments eased and their spirits lifted. It's as if the bridge has taken the raw, chaotic energy of the cosmic storm and refined it into pure blessing. The process doesn't end when the storm passes. In fact, the most beautiful phase begins as the tempest moves on toward other regions of the cosmic weather system. As the last of the storm clouds drift away and normal light returns to the sky, Bifrost emerges transformed. Every band of color shines with enhanced brilliance, as if the bridge has been reborn in the storm's aftermath. The red band glows with the deep, rich color of garnets held up to firelight. Orange radiates with the warm intensity of perfect autumn sunsets. Yellow blazes with the pure brightness of summer sun at noon. Green flows with the deep, living color of ancient forests in springtime. Blue stretches with the vast serenity of cloudless skies. Indigo pulses with the mysterious depth of twilight waters. Violet whispers with the gentle radiance of evening stars. Heimdall often receives visitors in the days following such storms, as gods and other beings come to marvel at Bifrost's renewed splendor. Even those who have seen the bridge countless times find themselves awestruck by its post-storm magnificence. The colors seem deeper, the structure more solid, the entire bridge more perfectly integrated into the cosmic order that governs the relationships between worlds. But the enhanced beauty isn't merely superficial. The storm has strengthened Bifrost's fundamental structure, reinforcing the bonds between its color bands and increasing its capacity to handle heavy divine traffic. The bridge emerges from each cosmic tempest more resilient, more stable, and more beautiful than it was before. It's as if the storms serve as both maintenance and upgrade procedures, keeping the bridge in perfect condition throughout the ages. Sometimes, during the quiet hours after a storm has passed, and the bridge gleams with renewed brilliance, Heimdall reflects on the deeper meaning of what he's witnessed. Bifrost's relationship with cosmic weather demonstrates something profound about how challenges and difficulties can become sources of growth and renewal when they're met with the right attitude and preparation. These visits give Heimdall opportunities to share his observations about the storm's effects, to explain how the bridge's interaction with cosmic weather reveals important truths about the nature of strength and resilience. He points out that Bifrost doesn't simply endure storms, it collaborates with them, using their power to become more than it was before. It's a lesson that applies to more than just divine architecture. The bridge doesn't fear storms or try to avoid them. Instead, it welcomes them as opportunities for refinement and strengthening. This perspective, seeing difficulties as chances for improvement rather than merely obstacles to endure, represents a wisdom that extends far beyond the Guardian's duties at the Rainbow Bridge. As night falls and the storm-cleansed bridge settles into its gentle evening glow, you can see in its renewed radiance a promise that even the most challenging weather eventually passes, leaving behind something stronger and more beautiful than what existed before. And perhaps you wonder about the oaths and promises that bind Heimdall to his endless watch beside this miracle of divine engineering. From the beauty of Bifrost renewed by storms, we come to the solemn promises that bind its guardian to his eternal duty. The oath that Heimdall swore when he accepted guardianship of the Rainbow Bridge wasn't a simple pledge of loyalty or a casual promise of service. It was a fundamental commitment that reshaped his very existence, binding him to purposes larger than personal desire and responsibilities that would define every moment of his immortal life. The ceremony took place in the earliest days of Asgard, when the great halls were newly built, and the gods were still establishing the customs and traditions that would govern their realm for ages to come. Odin had recognized the need for someone to guard the Rainbow Bridge, someone whose dedication could be trusted absolutely, whose vigilance would never waver regardless of the centuries that might pass. You can imagine the scene in Gladsheim, Odin's great hall, as the gods gathered to witness this unprecedented oath-taking. This wasn't merely an appointment to a position or the assignment of a duty. It was the creation of a new kind of divine service, a role that had never existed before, and would require commitment beyond anything previously asked of the gods. Heimdall approached the center of the hall with the quiet dignity that has always marked his character. He wore his finest armor, polished to mirror brightness, and carried his sword at his side, though he knew he would not need it for this ceremony. His enhanced senses took in every detail of the moment, the way torchlight flickered against the hall's carved pillars, the subtle sounds of divine breathing and heartbeats, the mixture of solemnity and anticipation that filled the air. Odin stood before his high seat, holding in his hands a drinking horn carved from materials that existed nowhere in the mortal world. This wasn't Jalahorn, that mighty instrument would come later. This was something different, a ceremonial vessel created specifically for oath-taking, carved from the crystallized essence of promises themselves, inlaid with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living script. The All-Father's voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of absolute authority combined with deep respect for the sacrifice that Heimdall was about to make. Heimdall, son of 9 mothers, keeper of keen sight and sharp hearing, do you come before us willingly to accept the guardianship of Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge that connects our realm to all others? Heimdall's response came without hesitation, though those present could hear in his voice the full understanding of what he was committing to. I come willingly, All-Father, knowing the cost, and counting it fair exchange for the honor of serving all the gods and all the worlds that depend upon the bridge's safety. What followed was unlike any other oath-taking in the history of Asgard. This wasn't simply a matter of swearing loyalty or promising faithful service. The oath that Heimdall was about to take would bind him to the bridge itself, making him not just its guardian but part of its essential nature. The commitment would reshape his existence at the most fundamental level, linking his life force to the bridge's continued function. Odin began the formal recitation, his words carrying the power to reshape reality through divine will. Heimdall of the keen senses, if you accept this guardianship, you will become the bridge's living extension, its eyes and ears, its judgment and protection. Your vigil will not end with the setting of any sun, or the changing of any season. It will continue until the end of all things, until the final battle calls you to lay down your watch. The gravity of these words settled over the assembled gods like a heavy blanket. They were witnessing the birth of a new kind of divine service, one that would span ages beyond easy counting. Heimdall was accepting not just responsibility but a fundamental change in the nature of his existence. He would become something unique among the gods, a being whose individual desires would always be secondary to his cosmic duties. Heimdall accepted each condition with calm certainty. I swear by my sight, which sees across all worlds, that I will watch over Bifrost, and all who would cross it with eyes that never close in negligence or weariness. His voice grew stronger with each phrase, as if the very act of making these promises was lending him additional power and resolve. I swear by my hearing, which catches sounds from the edge of creation, that no threat will approach the bridge undetected, no enemy will cross it unchallenged, no legitimate traveler will be turned away without cause. The ceremonial hall seemed to resonate with his words, as if the building itself was witnessing and recording his promises. I swear by my sword, which has never known defeat, that I will defend the bridge against all who would damage or destroy it, whether they come as enemies of the gods, or as forces of chaos seeking to sever the connections between worlds. As he spoke these words, his weapon seemed to hum with quiet approval, recognizing its role in the oath being sworn. I swear by my horn, which will one day wake all the worlds, that I will sound the alarm when the final battle begins, that no god will face their destiny unprepared, that my voice will be the first to announce the twilight of the gods. This promise carried special weight, for it bound Heimdall not just to present duties but to a specific role in the cosmic endgame that all the gods knew awaited them. Odin raised the ceremonial horn, which now glowed with inner light as it filled with mead that sparkled like liquid starlight. This wasn't ordinary drink, but something created for this moment, a substance that would seal the oath by becoming part of Heimdall's very essence. Drink, guardian, and let these promises become as real as stone, as lasting as the world tree itself. Heimdall accepted the horn with steady hands and drank deeply. The mead tasted of distant storms and morning light, of duty willingly accepted, and power responsibly wielded. As it flowed through him, he felt the changes beginning, his already exceptional senses expanding further, his connection to Bifrost deepening from mere proximity to actual unity, his awareness of cosmic patterns sharpening, until he could perceive the subtle threads that connected all events across the 9 worlds. But the most profound change was in his relationship to time itself, where other gods experienced the flow of moments in the usual way, present becoming past, future approaching to become present. Heimdall began to exist in a kind of eternal now, where his vigil was not a series of discrete moments, but a single, continuous act of watching that would extend until the end of everything. The other gods witnessed this transformation, with a mixture of awe and sadness. They were seeing one of their number accept a burden that would isolate him from many of the pleasures and freedoms that divine existence usually offered. Heimdall was becoming something larger than an individual god. He was becoming a function, a cosmic principle embodied in divine form. Yet there was also honor in what they witnessed. Heimdall's willing sacrifice of personal freedom for the greater good of all the worlds represented the highest form of service, the kind of dedication that heroes are remembered for across ages. His oath would make possible the continued connection between realms, the safe passage of gods on their various missions, the security that allowed divine civilization to flourish. As the ceremony concluded, each god present came forward to acknowledge Heimdall's new role and to pledge their respect for his sacrifice. Thor clasped his hand with the firm grip of warrior brotherhood. Frigg blessed him with her understanding of how individual choices ripple outward to affect the fates of all beings. Balder offered him the gift of his friendship, promising that the Guardian's isolation would never be complete as long as the gods remembered what he had given up for their sake. Even Loki, unpredictable though he was, approached with genuine respect for the magnitude of Heimdall's commitment. Whatever conflicts might arise between them in future ages, Loki understood and honored the selflessness of accepting such a burden willingly and completely. In the days that followed the oath-taking, Heimdall took up his position beside Bifrost with a sense of purpose that transformed every aspect of his existence. His watch was no longer just a job or even a calling. It was the fundamental expression of his identity, the way he participated in the ongoing creation and maintenance of cosmic order. The oath he had sworn became a living thing within him, a constant presence that guided his decisions and shaped his responses to every situation. When travelers approached the bridge, His evaluation of their fitness to cross was informed by promises that had become part of his essential nature. When threats appeared on the horizon, his response was powered by commitments that ran deeper than mere personal conviction. Over the centuries, Heimdall's faithfulness to his oath became legendary throughout the Nine Worlds. Stories spread of his incorruptible vigilance, his perfect judgment, his unwavering dedication to duties that never grew lighter with the passage of time. His example inspired other gods to greater dedication in their own responsibilities, showing them what could be accomplished when divine power was guided by unshakable commitment to purposes larger than the self. Sometimes, during the quiet hours of his watch, Heimdall reflects on the oath that defined his existence and wonders how different his life might have been if he had chosen differently. But these thoughts never last long because he knows with absolute certainty that he made the right choice. The security of the bridge, the safety of interworld travel, the continuation of connections that hold the cosmos together, all of these depend on promises he made willingly and keeps gladly. His oath bound him not just to guard a bridge, but to preserve the very concept of connection between different realms and different kinds of beings. In accepting this responsibility, Heimdall became something unique in all the Nine Worlds, a god whose individual identity had become inseparable from his cosmic function, whose personal fulfillment came through perfect service to purposes infinitely larger than himself. And so he stands, eternal and watchful, beside the rainbow bridge that connects all worlds, his oath as bright and enduring as Bifrost itself, a promise made flesh, a commitment that will outlast the gods themselves. In his quiet dedication, we see reflected the noblest possibilities of service, sacrifice, and the willing acceptance of duties that matter more than personal comfort or freedom. As we drift toward sleep beside these ancient stories, perhaps we carry with us some echo of Heimdall's steadfast dedication, some inspiration drawn from his willingness to bind himself to purposes greater than individual desire, some comfort in knowing that even in a cosmos filled with uncertainty and change, there are guardians who keep their promises across the vast expanses of time itself. Thus conclude our gentle journeys through the myths of Bifrost and its eternal guardian, where ancient wisdom meets the peaceful rhythms of sleep and rest.